Okay. Okay, so hopefully our recording is done. So what we are going to cover today is the third topic of the course, Java Programming Basics. So you can get the slides, and this is the hands-on lab. Okay, so let's go to the presentation. Programming Basics. So what we are going to cover in this presentation is to learn the basic constructor of a Java program. And in fact, we are going to start learning the simplest possible Hello World application piece by piece. And then we are going to learn the concepts of Java literals and primitive data types, variables and identifiers and operators. Again, these are pretty basic concepts. So if you have written Java programs in the past, these are the things that you probably well aware of. Next slide. So dissecting our first Hello World application. Slide number 4. So this is probably the simplest possible Java applications you probably have seen many times. So we are going to dissect this application line by line moving forward. Slide number 5. So you can see the first line, it says public class hello. So in Java, every code has to be inside the class definition. And the name of the class here is hello. And class is a keyword, meaning I'm building hello class. And then we have what is called the public. This is called access modifier. And what it means is that this class can be accessible by other classes, either in the same package or other packages. We are going to learn the concept of package later on in this course. You can think of a package as a collection of classes. Let me see. If you have any questions, feel free to post it, and once in a while I'm going to stop and answer those questions. Okay, so a class definition start with curly brace. And you can have this curly brace after the first line or at the same line. It doesn't matter. The next 3 lines, this is comment, meaning it doesn't have any impact on the programming logic. And we're going to learn a couple of ways of actually having comment. And this is one way of having comment, /* and then you have your comment, and then the comment could be ending. Comment ends with * and /. Okay, so this is a method, and this is what is called the main method. And every application has to have a main method because main method is the starting point of the application. Now, there are some cases that you don't see main method, for example, like applet or even the server-side applications such as servlet. It's because those types of applications are running inside what is called a container, and container is going to just start those special kind of applications such as the applets or servlets. When we are building standalone applications, which is the case of hello application, you have to have a main method. So it starts with a main. This is the name of the method. And this is a return value, so we are not returning anything, so it's void. So every main method has to return void, and this is static, and this is again public, meaning this method could be accessible from somewhere else. And then these are the command line arguments. Now, main method is special in the sense that you have to have exactly like this. Okay, so there is no deviation from this. Other type of methods, you can have a different, let's say, set of arguments. Of course, you can have a different name, But for main method, which is a special method, you have to write this way. Okay, question from Sunny. So what is the role of static? Static method is the method that is actually common to so we are going to talk about the concept of static and concept of class versus object in detail later on. So I'm not going to actually explain in detail for now, but you can think of static method is actually common to all objects of a particular class. Okay, so but we'll talk about the concept of static and non-static. A non-static method is called the instance method, and we'll talk about those concepts in detail in other presentations moving forward. Okay, so the next line is another type of comment. So you can have a comment in this format, or you can have a comment with double slash. Next, this is what is called a statement. So in Java code, the business logic is constructed by having statements, and each statement ends with a semicolon. So in this statement, what you're saying is, I want to display the string of hello world on a standard device, typically on a display. So this is an example of programming logic inside a method. By the way, every programming logic is in the form of a statement, and programming logic is going to be inside a method. Okay, so the method has to be ending with closing curly braces, closing curly brace, and your class also has to end with curly brace. By the way, if you don't follow these rules, IDE, that means Eclipse will tell you, so it's not really a big deal. If you don't remember all these rules, that's perfectly fine. IDEs will actually let you know what mistakes you made. And of course, if you are using command line tools such as Java C for compilation, it will tell you what syntax error it has detected. Okay, so coding requirements. So this is important aspect. Java code has to be inside a file, and the file has to end with .java extension. Okay, and there is no deviation. You cannot have .xyz and assume it is a Java code. Every Java code has to finish with a .java extension. Now, another important aspect is this. The name of the file has to match the name of the class. So if you're building hello class, as we have done in the past, that file has to be hello.java. You cannot have it, let's say, hello1.java, and the compiler will actually tell you that's a syntax error. So this is important. Okay, moving forward. So there are three different ways of creating comments, actually two different ways. And one style is C++ style, and the other one is a C style, but these are not really important. And then there is actually a way that you can actually create a Java doc from your application. So we'll see how this could be done. So let's see. C++ style is basically every line prefixed with double slash. Okay, so that is a comment. If you're using double slash, you have to use double slash for every single line. On the other hand, C style, which you have seen already, you can have slash star, and then you can have a multiple lines as a comment. And then you end with the star slash. So if you have a multiple lines of comment, and you might want to actually use C style syntax. Okay, Java.comment. The Java.comment is basically used for creating Java documentation. So I assume you have, some of you probably have seen Java documentation of a particular class, for example, string class. And it actually gives you what is the input parameter, what is the return value, who's the author, and things like that. Now, if you write your own Java applications and you can actually create a Java doc from it, you have to follow some the convention. Okay, so the comment has to start with a slash star star and end with a star slash, and then these are the metadata that you can specify. Okay. So this is a way that you can, well, this is again comment. However, when you're creating Java documentation from your own applications, this metadata will be used. We are going to actually talk about Java doc, how to create Java documentation later on in this course. Moving forward, statements and blocks. So statement is basically one or more lines of code terminated by a semicolon. Okay, so we have seen an example of this. Okay, so we have in this case a single line of code ends with semicolon, and this one is a statement. So basically your business logic is going to be in the form of Java statements. What is a block? Block is basically multiple lines of statements. That's a block. So in this case, we have 2 lines of statements. And whenever you have more than a single line, they have to be inside a block. And block is created with a syntax of, again, starting curly brace and ending a curly brace. So if you do not have curly brace, so block is, you can think of, so from this to this is a block, and this block has 2 statements. Okay. By the way, the white spaces are ignored. Next slide, slide number 21. Coding guidelines. Again, you can have the curly brace at the same line with your method or different line. I think most of the application you see in our course, you probably see a method with curly brace at the same line, but it really doesn't matter. Okay. Indentation, again, this is coding guidelines, meaning it's actually a recommendation rather than a requirement. So typically you won't have indentation inside your block. So in this case, this statement has the indentation. So most of the IDEs, well, actually all IDEs have a scheme of, has a way of actually having a nice looking indentation. Okay, moving forward, concept of identifier. You can think of identifier as a name. The name of a variable, a name of a method, a name of a class. These are all called Java identifiers. So examples we have seen so far, hello, that is the name of the class. Main is the name of the method. And system is basically a name of a class as well. And out is also a name of a static method. Now, in Java, they are case sensitive. Okay, so the hello is not the same as, in this case, hello with a capital H is not the same as hello with lowercase h. They are different identifiers. They are considered as different names. Okay, moving forward. So there are some rules that you have to follow when you create an identifier, meaning for the name of a variable, a name of a method, and things like that. So identifiers must begin with either a letter or underscore or a dollar sign. You cannot start your identifier with a number. However, number could be after a letter or underscore or dollar sign. And of course, your identifiers cannot be the same as Java keywords such as class, public, void. These are reserved identifiers and you cannot use those. Question from Paul. Why can identifiers not start with a number? Well, it's just a syntax. Many different languages have a different syntax rules. And in Java, it is designed in a way that it doesn't allow you to start with a number. Why? I think that's a good question. Number could be actually quite common things to get started with any name. So, but I think the designers of Java decided that having a number as starting the character of identifier might be a bit confusing. But I don't think there is any serious actually reason for not allowing it, because some languages allow it definitely. Okay, so recommendation in terms of naming your identifiers. For names of classes, capitalize the first letter, and then you can have, for different words, you can have the capital letter like this. So this is example of class name. For name of a method or variable, typically it is recommended starting with a small letter, and then you can have camel, the annotation. Okay, so for multi-word identifiers, as we have seen in the previous case, in the case of, again, variable or a method names, it's recommended to start with a small letter, and then you can have the capital letters for different words after that. And it is recommended not to use underscore unless you are actually writing some system level code. So for example, if you're building, let's say, some kind of framework, if you're building some web application framework, and there could be some system level, meaning framework identifiers. In those cases, they might use underscore, but your business logic typically shouldn't use underscore unless you have a reason to do. Okay, question from Trey. Why can I start a class and or a method start like a class name, or just void class name? This is seen in the Java certification questions. Let me actually read the question one more time. Why can I start? Why can start a class and or a method start like class name? Yeah, I'm not really sure what you're asking, Trey. So if you can actually send me an example of the particular code example, I'll probably understand better. Okay. All right, moving forward. Okay, so Java keyword. Keywords are predefined identifiers reserved by Java, meaning you cannot use those in your code as your own identifiers. So slide number 29, so these are Java keywords. So you cannot use these Java keywords as your identifiers. Question from Mutasa. What if I start class name with a small character? Doesn't matter. Syntax-wise, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so it's a recommendation rather than a requirement. It's not going to actually give you a syntax error. Moving forward, Java literal. Okay, so I see a Trey's response. Okay, so you're asking whether it's okay to have a class, small class. So I'm going to actually respond by the chatting later on, because people might want to actually see this example, Trey. Okay, so I'm going to just move on for now. Okay, so Java literals. So you can think of literals as constant value, and of course, depending on the type, you could have integer literal, floating point literals, and boolean literals, character literals, and string literals. So for integer literal, it could be decimal, hexadecimal, and octal. So these are the examples. So for decimal, you say 12, 11, and things like that. For hexadecimal, you start with OX, and then you can have the 0 to the CDE, I think. And octal, you actually proceed by 0, like this. Okay? So mostly you're going to deal with this form of integer. Floating point is the have the fractal parts. It's the decimals with the fractal parts, and you can have two different notations. Pretty straightforward. Boolean could be either true or false. Character represent a single Unicode character. So Unicode character is basically a 16-bit character set, and it basically covers pretty much all possible characters, including all different, let's say, languages. So question from Michelle, why is double with a big D not listed as a literal? Oh, you mean actually a small double. So yeah, small double, it should be actually literal. Okay, so it's actually probably missing on the slide. So double with the small d, that's certainly a literal, but with a big D, meaning so I'm going to actually talk about the these literals, and I'm going to actually talk about the reference type of those literals later on. Okay, so character literal with a single quote like this, and there's also special character literal such as new line or carriage return and backspace. Okay, string literals is something that you probably see a lot. So when you have like a double quotation hello world, that's considered as a string literal. Okay, so concept of variables. So a variable is used to store some data. And now, a variable has a name, of course, and it also has to have a data type. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the concept of data type in the following slide. So when you define a variable, this is a syntax that you are going to use. You give a type of that variable, and then you give a name. And you can also assign initial value, and then ends with semicolon. So that's the syntax. Now, people say Java programming language is statically typed, meaning every variable has to be typed at the compile time. On the other hand, there are scripting languages which are dynamically typed. What that means is that the type of a variable will be determined at the runtime, during runtime, rather than at compile time. So Java, once a variable is typed with a particular type, that stays there with that type because it's actually determined at the compile time. So example of providing data type and the value here is, so here I am creating double primitive type variable called the grade, and I'm also assigning 0.0. Okay, and this is also a type called person. So this is your own class, and this is a name of a variable. So in this slide, the key point is that every variable, in this case grade or X, has to have a type. The type could be primitive type, something that we have talked about up to this point, or it could be what is called the reference type. And I'll talk about reference type in a few minutes. Now, as I said before, every primitive type, such as double, float, integer, int actually, have a corresponding reference type. And again, we're going to talk about those things later on in detail. But for now, keep in mind that the type could be either primitive type or reference type. And we'll talk about the difference in this presentation later on. Okay, so these are the examples in your code. So this is actually a complete Java application that should be able to run fine. So you have a class named variable samples, and then we have main method, which has to be exactly like this. And then we have defined few variables. They are all primitive type. So here, result variable is primitive type of boolean, and this option is character primitive type, and we actually assigning C character into that variable. And then here we have an example of grade variable whose type is double. Okay, so it's always good to initialize your variable as you declare them. Again, this is recommendation, it's not mandatory. So if you know the if you know the value that needs to, if you know the case that, well, let me actually repeat. In general, if you know the initial value, it's actually a good idea to initialize it when you declare the variable, but you can also actually initialize later on in your code. And this recommendation is somewhat obvious. Use descriptive names for your variable. I mean, again, this is actually too obvious. Okay, so you can declare multiple statements on a single line as long as each statement ends with semicolon. So you can actually have, this is a different case. You can declare the multiple variables with a single data type like this. Okay, or you can certainly declare in different lines like this. Okay, in general, different lines is recommended, but it's not, again, a big deal. It's personal taste. Okay, so outputting variable data. So you can actually display the value of your variable using these two, either of this, system.out.println and system.out.print statement. We are going to talk about the syntax of this system class later on in detail, but for now, just think of this as a statement for displaying something. Okay? Display something, in this case, something is going to be the value of a variable. Okay, so let's see example of it. So we have output variable class, and then we have a main method, and then we have defined a few variables. In this case, we initialize the variable called the value. So you can use system.out.println and provide the name of the variable, in this case value, then it will display 10. Okay, and you can also say this is a string literal, and then you can actually use a plus, the operator, and then provide the name of the variable, in this case x, and then it will display like this. Straightforward, I hope. So what's the difference between println and print statements? So println is basically appends. It actually appends a new line at the end of the display, and print doesn't. It doesn't append new line. So difference is like this. So in this case, if you have print statement, in this case displaying hello and hello world, it will end up like this because there is no new line added, after the first hello. But in this case, if you're using ln, println, then each line will be appended with a new line. Okay, primitive types. So we have seen primitive types already, examples of those. So these are all primitive types: Boolean, character, byte, short, int, long, and double, and float. Okay, so primitive data types are used to hold non-object values. So when we say non-object values, you're talking about the non-reference type. Again, we're going to talk about the concept of the reference type in a few minutes. And primitive types are provided in Java programming language for high-performance computing. So if you're actually building an application that does a lot of number crunching, usage of primitive data types, in fact, provide a better performance over the case that you're using non-primitive types. Okay, so this is a case that we are using Boolean primitive types. So you can assign the true to Boolean primitive type variable called the result. This is the text primitive type. Okay, so this is A, and this is a tab. Now, if you want to add, if you want to have double quotation, which is a special character, you have to actually provide a backslash. Same thing with single quotation. So this is byte, long, int, long primitive types. Again, we have seen the examples of this. I'm moving a bit faster because these are pretty straightforward concepts. I would like to have some time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so these are the differences between byte, short, int, and long. So these are the size of those primitive types. Byte is 8 bits, short is 16 bits, int is 32 bits, and long is 64 bits. So in defining long value, long lowercase, lowercase l is not recommended. So I should say small l rather than the large L, because it's hard to distinguish from digit 1. Again, this is pretty straightforward. So this is floating point. And these are, again, the range. Float is 4 byte, and the double is 8 bytes. Okay, so primitive type versus reference type. Yeah, so this is important concept. So we have seen examples of primitive type. In fact, there are 8 primitive type types, such as float, int, boolean, and things like that. Okay. Now, when you're using primitive type variable, the actual value is stored in actual memory location where the variable is. Okay. So I'm going to actually give you an example. I'm going to actually use the graphics in the following slide, so you'll have a better understanding. Now, when you're using reference variable is actually pointing to another memory location of an object. An object could be string object, it could be person object, it could be address object, and things like that. So it points to another memory location where actual data is. So when you declare a variable with a particular class, for example, string class, a person class, you are actually declaring a reference variable that points to the actual object. Okay, so let's see this picture. So let's see we have an example where we have a num variable which is primitive type, and string is a class. So here this is a reference type. So whenever you're using class, that means that's a reference type or non-primitive type. So here we have defined a variable called the name, which is a string class type. Okay, and we are assigning the value hello to this. Now let's take a look at the picture on the following slide, how things are managed. So for num, which is int primitive type, the value is actually saved right there. Okay. However, for non-primitive type or reference type variable, it is actually pointing. It actually contains the address. The variable contains the address to point to an object instance. Okay. Now, whether you have to understand this or not, whether it's going to actually have any implication in your coding, it doesn't. It's just, good to know kind of thing. Okay. Which means when you are actually writing code, you don't really actually be concerned about this. Okay. But just to give you a difference between the primitive type versus and reference type variables, how they actually in fact structured internally. Question? Okay, so no questions, so we're going to move forward. Okay, so the concepts of operators, again, pretty straightforward. So we have arithmetic operators, relational operators, logical operators, and conditional operators. Again, these are something that you probably have seen many times. So these are arithmetic operators, plus, multiplication, division, and this is the case that you get the remainder of the dividing of up 1 by up 2, and this is subtraction. So this is sample applications. We're going to actually take a look at, well, these are the things that you're going to actually try when you do the hands-on lab. So I'm going to move forward. Now, when you're using integer or floating point numbers, in this case, integer will be implicitly converted to floating point before operation takes place. Okay, so we have the increment and decrement operators, and they are actually called unary increment operator, the plus plus and minus minus. Okay, so in this statement, what you're saying is, I'm going to add 1 to count variable and then assign the result to the count variable. Okay, so whatever value, that count value will be incremented by 1. And that is the same thing as this. Okay, so I'm basically incrementing count variable by 1. Okay, now you can have this unary operator either before the variable or after the variable. So let's see an example of this. So the difference is this. If you happen to have that unary plus plus before the variable, what happens is that the variable will be incremented first, and then the expression will be evaluated. So in this case, let's say I is 10. We are assigning the value 10 to I, value 3 to j, and value 0 to k. So in this case, we are going to increment j first. So j is going to be 4. And then we are going to do this, we will evaluate this expression. So then I is added. So it will be 14. So k will be 14. Okay, now let's take a look at an example where we have plus plus after the variable. So here we have j plus plus, and then we have the I here. So what happens in this case is that if you have plus plus after the variable, then you are going to use existing value of the variable for the evaluating expression. So j is 3 and I is 10, so k is 13, right? And then j is going to be incremented by 1. So in this case, in both cases, j will be incremented to 4, but the value of k is going to be different. Okay. Relational operators, again, pretty straightforward concept. So let's move on. So these are examples. So I'm going to just move on. Okay, logical operators. So we have a logical AND, and we have what is called the boolean logical AND. We'll see the difference between these two, and then logical OR, a boolean logical OR, and then boolean logical exclusive OR, and logical NOT. So let's see each of these. So logical operators, you have two operands, x1 and x2, and then you're going to use logical operators. So let's see this the logical logical AND. So in this case, these are the examples. Suppose I have first operand x1, x2. So both have to be true in order to be true. If anyone is false, then it results in false. Okay? So this is basically AND operation. Now, what's the difference between this double versus single, the ampersand? So the difference is this double ampersand supports short circuit evaluation, meaning partial evaluation, while the single ampersand doesn't. So let's say an example. So if you have expression 1 and this 2, the logical, these ampersand AND operators, what happens is that in this case, it will evaluate expression 1 first, and if it is false, it will immediately return false. Okay. On the other hand, if you're using single operator, it will actually evaluate these two expressions first, and then use the operator. Okay. Okay, so hopefully that's kind of the obvious. So again, if you're using double ampersand, as soon as expression 1 turned out to be false, it will return false. If you're using single, it will actually evaluate expression 1 and expression 2, both of them first, and then it will actually use the logical operator. Okay, so this is an example. So this one works pretty much the same. So again, the result is as long as 1 is true, it will return true. And again, the difference between this double vertical bar and single vertical bar, logical and Boolean logical, is if you're using the logical double vertical bar, and it will evaluate expression 1 first. And if it turns out to be true, then it will return true without evaluating expression 2. If you're using single Boolean logical operator, then it will evaluate both. And if one of those turned out to be true, then it will return true. Okay, so these are pretty straightforward examples. And this is Boolean logical exclusive OR. So in this case, is returning true if and only one operand is true and the other one is false. So in this case, the second and third is going to be true. All right, so this is relatively straightforward. And NOT is NOT. So again, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so conditional operator. This is, you probably have not seen that often if you haven't done any Java programming. So expression is evaluated first. And if it is true, then the value of expression 2 will be returned. And if expression 1 turned out to be false, then expression 3 will be evaluated and the result of expression 3 will be returned. Okay, so let's see an example. So in this case, we wrote a code that if grade, the value of grade is greater than or equal to 60, so in this case, because grade is 80, this will return true, right? Because it's true, it will return the value of this expression, which in this case, just a string value, passed. Okay, so status will contain the passed string literal. And if you say, maybe if you change to 90, then it will actually get fail, because this turned out to be false in that case. All right, so this is pretty straightforward. Operator precedence, I mean, works pretty much the same in any other programming language. So again, it's not that much of a big deal. So this is the same as this. To avoid, again, this is a guideline. You might want to actually use parentheses whenever possible to reduce the confusion. All right, so we have learned the Java statement concept of block and identifier keyword, and 3 different ways of creating comments, concept of literal, concept of primitive data type, and reference data type. Again, we haven't really spent that much time on reference data type, so if you are kind of fuzzy on that concept, that's perfectly fine. We'll actually spend rest of this course typically using the reference type in our applications. All right, so we have 13 minutes, so I'm going to actually spend explaining hands-on lab. Okay, so this is lab 1002, pretty straightforward hands-on lab here. So exercise 1 is the first exercise. You are going to write a program using NetBeans IDE, and exercise 1.2, the second 1.2 is using command line tool, again Java C and Java. So here we are going to create a new project. So typically you're going to say File and New Project, select File from the top level menu and create a new project. You see New Project dialog box, select Java and select Java Application. And then you give a project name, and then you provide the name of the main class. So in our example here, we are going to name it as output variable, and finish. And then we are going to add these 10 lines of code. So basically we define a few primitive type variables, value x and a, and grade, and then we display things. Very straightforward. Okay, so moving forward. And on the 2, we are going to use command line tools, Java C and Java. So Java C is a compiler, and Java is a runtime. This is basically, you can think of as a JRE, Java Runtime Environment. So we are going to use whatever editor of your choice, and then create output variable, the Java file. As you can see, this name of the Java file has to be the same of your class. Okay? If they are not matching, that is a syntax error. Okay? And then we compile it, and then we run the application. Once you compile it, it will generate output variable.class file, and then you can run that output variable class file using Java. The reason you can actually run that class file as an application is because it contains main method. Okay, so you cannot run that application unless that the output variable class contains a Java method, a main method. Okay, and here we are actually modifying the Java file to add another primitive type variable, and then print it out. Again, very straightforward. Exercise 2 is conditional operator exercise. So creating project in the same way. And then here we are actually using the conditional operator. Okay. Okay, so exercise 3 is creating average number. Again, it's not that much of a big deal. So just have 3 numbers, and then we create the average, and then you just print it out. Very straightforward. And exercise 4 is finding the greatest number. So you're basically using very simple logic of comparing these 3 numbers. Okay, and then so we're actually using conditional, operator. Okay. Okay, so the lab is very straightforward. And today, again, the concept is relatively straightforward. Except we haven't really learned the concept of reference type, but you have an exposure to primitive type versus reference type. Questions? Sunny was asking, what is the next step? So if you go to our course webpage, so what we are going to cover next week is how to receive input from the keyboard, and how to do control structure programming. For example, how to use if and else and while and things like that. Okay. Again, these are still pretty straightforward and basic concepts you're still dealing with. Is that your question, Sunny? Okay, so question from Sunny. Do we need to submit anything? So if you actually go to our hands-on lab, you actually see the homework, right? So that's the one that you want to do. Again, it shouldn't take more than, let's say, 10 minutes. And then you're going to submit the homework as described. So this is homework. And question from Wendell. Where are the homework, the assignment? Oh, okay, so you got it. Yeah, so at the end. So for each topic, there is a corresponding hands-on lab. And at the end of each hands-on lab, you have a homework. So this is the homework instruction, and this is how you're going to send that homework to me. Okay, so make the homework. So question from Mustafa. When should I make the homework? You can actually so the deadline of the homework is 2 weeks after the last session, meaning we are going to end this course sometime, I think, in July. So you have almost 5 months for doing all the homeworks. So you are welcome to submit. You are welcome to submit homework on a weekly basis, but you can actually do homework whenever you find time, and you can submit homework at the end. So it's up to you. Question from Daniel. Does it matter which compiler we use? I have BlueJ installed already, and I'm familiar with it. It doesn't matter. You can use any compiler of your choice. So as I said before, you can use either NetBeans or Eclipse. I haven't really actually talked to you about how to build an application in Eclipse, and I haven't actually created the lab, but as soon as I find time, probably in a month or two, I'm going to actually create the hands-on labs that actually describe how to use Eclipse. But if you actually have some exposure via using Eclipse already, feel free to use Eclipse as your idea of your choice. Any other questions?